Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, we're going to talk about the Ineos vote and bid. We're going to talk about some clarity on the shares and the buyout. We want to talk about as well some of the false information that is constantly being spread out there by people who do not understand what's going on, which is a big part of what is leading people to be so bothered and disappointed. And I think that setting things straight is always worth taking the time. Talk about the priorities for Ineos once they are in, and quite a bit more. So let's get into it. All right, first and foremost, with regards to all of this, there's a few things that need some clarity. One of the things is that the bid for United as it is right now, this whole 25% thing, nobody really knows the details of the actual bid itself, the financials. It is speculative, myself included on this respect. These are the types of details that are not likely to leak. So if I'm talking about, Class A versus Class B, things like that, a lot of it is speculative at the moment in terms of the details, in terms of costs, in terms of how it'll work, any of that. But the overall gist of it is that the Ineos bid will entail buying a portion of Class Bs and a portion of Class As in order to, at the same price, in order to satisfy some of the legal challenges that are out there. It's unclear in what proportion of each. Would it be the same number of each shares? Would it be 25% of the Class B shares and 25% of the Class A? There was an article from Wall Street Journal that indicated maybe it would be that. Nobody knows. But at the end of it, once we do know, then we can evaluate exactly what it means in terms of voting rights, ownership percentages, things like that. Until then, we can only speculate. But from what has been mentioned and what has been reported, either way it goes, and I think there's about 2 or 3 different scenarios that are possible, Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos would become the largest shareholder at United with the most vote. That doesn't mean majority, just means the largest and with the most vote. And I think that's just important to note that it would be the biggest shareholder. Either way, there is a route wherein if it's done a certain way, then it is one of only 2 stages where if they do this exact same purchase again in 6 months' time, then he would become a 51% owner at that point in time. But we'll talk about that more once we get clarity. That's the type of thing that will come after the board vote and after it's actually ratified. Those are details that cannot leak early because they have a very material effect on share prices and things like that. And so we can only speculate in the meantime without knowing exactly what it is. Those are the areas that we wouldn't expect people to get a lot of information on. Obviously, there's been a lot of information coming out in terms of other aspects, and I want to talk about those things in a few minutes. In terms of the board vote, obviously, it was reported yesterday that it was unlikely to be voted on by this week, Thursday, after initially being reported that it would likely be this Thursday. One of the things to definitely note on this is that this is the Thursday meeting was a pre-planned for quite some time scheduled board meeting, a regular quarterly one, most likely. These things occur all the time. And the Thursday goal was a matter of convenience, seeing if they could get it done by this point in time, and that would be the aim. As it stands, the lack of a vote at this board meeting doesn't indicate that there's anything wrong with the deal. It will still very likely be brought up and discussed to ensure that there's no unknown challenges or things like that. It'll still be entirely up to the Glazers. The only reason the deal didn't go through before, and I'm going to talk about a bit of this more in the next section in terms of bad info and what is being shared and kind of the stuff that's out there that is incorrect, as well as some of the details on Qatar, are the only reason it didn't go through before was because of those potential legal challenges. And so with those being already addressed and it being known that those are already addressed, it's unlikely that there's going to be any further challenges. Even if 6 directors who are not the Glazers didn't want it to go through, they couldn't do anything about it at this point in time. It would be pushed through by the Glazers, and then the deadlock broken by Joel Glazer as the chairman, alongside Avram. So there's nothing really to worry about with this. From everything that I continue to be told, it's not even a delay. It's simply the overall general agreement on this deal has essentially been reached by all parties, but there's a lot of fine-tuning in terms of getting all of the specifics right on how this works. For example, as I've said many times, Ineos would like to you want to be sure that they have the options to be buying up shares in the future, to become majority owners and eventually a full takeover as a part of the deal. The general gist of that, as I believe, is essentially there. That's always been the intention, but those are the type of things that have to be worked into the legal documents, how it's going to be worked, the exact price points, the exact dates, things like that. This is not a transfer. This is a deal that has been in the works for a long time and has essentially been agreed for a long time. It's not going to fall apart over minor details. These business things don't. It's a matter of, that's why people have been so confident. There's really not much of an update to the report. The initial report from The Athletic stated that there was a in principle agreement, but the finer details still need to be worked out. That's exactly what the Telegraph article said. That's exactly what's going on. There's nothing really new or happening on this, except these things are just being worked on. I happen to know that as of today, there are individuals around the Ineos deal working together in person and directly pretty close with people around the Glazers to try to finish this and get it done. It's just a matter of time and other commitments. Both parties have other things that may get in the way, that delay things a few days, in terms of wrapping up some of the specifics. So there's nothing to indicate that anything has changed in the slightest on this deal at this point in time. The board vote, a new one can be called at any point in time immediately in order to vote on something like this as soon as everything has been agreed. So that's that side of it. In terms of information, there's a few things that I want to talk about here because I understand the concerns of a lot of people. There's a lot of things we want to know as a part of this bid in order for everybody to, myself included, to be fully behind it. I know the intentions are for Jim Ratcliffe to become the majority and then full takeover in the long run, and to have clauses into the deal to make sure that he can guarantee he can do that in the future. I know that is the intention. I would like to know that is going to happen. That's one of the main things. That's probably the main thing, is that I think if we all know that in a year's time he can buy up another 25% and be the majority owner, it puts a lot of concerns to bed, right? It puts a lot of concerns to rest, because at that point in time, we know it's like, okay, it's really just a staggered takeover. It's more like practically it's a payment plan, that it just has to be done this way. And the only reason is legal reasons. And that's what I want to discuss, because there's a lot of bad information out there about why this is being done, about the Jim Ratcliffe bid, and about Qatar. First and foremost, I want to say this. Qatar are out. They have left the process. And it's not just that they've informed people. I mean, they've been very explicit about informing people that they're out of the process, that their bid is on the table. But I know for a fact that they also ended relationships with certain people and certain groups that they had as a part of this process earlier in the week. Ended those relationships that they had with them, business relationships that they had with them. This Qatari bid from Sheikh Jassim. They did that. They ended that. It is over. And they've made that very explicitly clear to a lot of people that even if this deal didn't go through, they wouldn't be coming back in. And this is where there's a huge amount of bad information. And I've kept trying to hint at it, and I've said it pretty directly, but for some reason people keep running with this because they cannot wrap their brain around it. Qatar winning the club has not been on the table for about 5 months. There's been so much false information put out here. The Qatari bid has been one, it became very clear that, well, let me put it this way. Let's talk about some of the price points first, okay? Because there's a few things to discuss. I saw somebody mention the other day that Qatar were offering $5 billion cash. That's the Glazers' money. You get it. While Jim Ratcliffe's giving 1.5 and they're only getting half because half's going to Class A and that's 750 million. So why would you do this deal? That's totally not true. It's totally a misrepresentation of what's going on. The Qatari bid had a enterprise valuation of $5 billion. That valuation includes debt of about $800 million. That means it was a bid for $4.2 billion. And of that, 69% goes to the Glazers. So that's $2.9 billion in cash to the Glazers, to be very clear. It's $2.9 billion in cash to the Glazers. Jim Ratcliffe's bid values the club at $6 billion, £6 billion minus the debt, 5.2. It is a full $1 billion higher than what the Qatari bid was at. His bid was accepted. His bid was agreed upon, but fell through based on these legal challenges. It became very clear that Joel and Avram would want to stick around. That's why he had that option, which was essentially what broke the deadlock, because the Glazers didn't really want to sell. Joel and Avram didn't really want out. They were any way that they could stay, they wanted to stay, and they were not prepared to accept the bid. The Qatari bid was not going to be accepted, and the sooner people accept that, the sooner they can think rationally about this. The Qatar bid was not going to be accepted, period. If Jim Ratcliffe walked away from these discussions, and his intention was for a full takeover and always has been, and he made 2 offers for a full takeover that were accepted, but we're stalled for other reasons, then if he had walked away, then nothing would have happened. And you cannot say, well, then another group would have come in a full takeover. Not true. There are so many other routes on the table here that would have allowed the Glazers to continue kicking the can down the road 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even longer, in hopes that they could, get to a point where with the new TV rights, with the new European Super League, with these types of things, that they could last and ride it out and for a long time. There's no guarantee you're getting somebody better than what these deals are on the table. In fact, in many instances, you might get worse. Where's all these good owners, these magical good owners, that are there? If you eliminate the states that are not coming in for it, the state-run oil clubs and things that are not coming in for Manchester United, where's all these magical good owners? You don't know that FSG. I brought up groups like Harris Blitzer, these types of people earlier in the year, and people were freaked out about more American groups. So figure it out, because if it wasn't Jim Ratcliffe, it was probably going to be private equity coming in and making a purchase if he had walked away. And the thing with this Qatari bid is that one of the things that has been untrue is they have not actually increased their bids so many times. There's been a lot of false information and things that have been pushed from their side about their bid. The actual fact of the matter is Qatar could not pay any more money. This bid is, as sort of had been discovered by a lot of people, a bit of a funny one from Qatar, because it's always come with these connections of these promises of all this money that's going to be spent. That has not gone down well with Rain Group and the Glazers because they don't have that money. So you ask, well, if they had $2 billion to invest in the club, why didn't they just go up and get the club? Because you can't invest in it if you don't own it. So you might as well spend some of that money getting it and then invest $1 billion instead of $2 billion. They didn't have that money. That money was never there. The whole story started to get really messy once it started to get down to the details and proof of funds. The Qatari bid was a bid from private owners, from private individuals, Sheikh Jassim and mostly his father, who has funding there, and some group of people for the club itself. All that extra funding for things around Old Trafford and in the area and investment were funds that they were expecting to be given by the state as part of a donation to the foundation. They didn't have that money. I'm not saying they wouldn't have gotten it. They probably would have if they had owned the club. But they did not have more money to buy Manchester United Football Club than what they said. They did not have more money than what they had last offered. That was it. They had reached their maximum. They could not go higher. That maximum was well below the Glazers' asking price. So there was no world where the Qataris were going to take over this club. And for months and months and months, I said that Ineos were operating under the presumption, because they had been told by Rain Group that they were the preferred bidder. And Rain Group, obviously for leverage and negotiation purposes, weren't going to tell them all the specifics about the Qatari bid at that point in time, about why and what was going on. But that was the reason. They didn't think the Qataris even had a valid offer on the table to go higher. They couldn't if they wanted to. And the proof of funding was very complex. So they didn't see that the money was there for them to go up to 5.5 or 6 billion. They didn't increase it in the last week when they were asked. So it's been a really interesting situation because there's been a lot of stuff reported and a lot of it isn't based in fact. And a lot of people are upset because they keep sticking with this, well, but Qatar were going to, but they never were. It was never going to happen. It's been off the table for such a long time in terms of reality. It's like, I don't know what else to say. It's all well and good for someone to come in. If I went in and promised that I could spend $2 billion and someone was going to give me $2 billion to invest in United Football Club, and all I could offer was $100,000 for the club, it doesn't do you any good. It's not a what if. They didn't have the money to buy it. Jim Ratcliffe's deal didn't keep the Glazers at United. The Glazers own United. They're the owners. They're the ones selling the asset. They're the ones in charge. They're the ones who can stick around. The default is they have it. So it's important to understand what's really been going on here, because the entire intention of Jim Ratcliffe is not to buy a small portion and keep the Glazers around. It's what on earth can I do to get control of this football club? And people are just, you could call it PR, it doesn't matter. People called it PR for the last 5 months when I kept saying that Ineos were going to win, that they were operating under the basis that they're the preferred bidder, all of that. It's not PR, it happens to be a fact. They had offers accepted to take over the club. All they've been doing for months and months and months is trying to figure out a route in which they can get into the club and start to take it over. And if people were looking at it rationally and logically, they would look at that and say, that was the only option on the table. That was the only option that was there that could potentially get the Glazers out of this club. And it's a brave decision, because it is going to get an enormous amount of backlash. And it's going to get an enormous amount of hate from people, as it already is, and it's already going to put him in a bad light. But it's potentially the only route, and it's the first time since 2003 that the Glazers' holdings will be diminished when this deal goes through. The first time in 20 years. And that is not really something to just pat down and call like it's bad. It's been a long time, and there's a lot of reasons why this was the only way that this could go. So we have to hope that it works out. There's obviously things I still want to see, as I said before, to make sure that it does result in a full takeover in the long run. But either way, getting in sporting control in the immediate is a huge, huge difference, because that's what we all need. And that's what I want to talk about next in terms of priorities. As far back as February, Ineos have been planning for what they can do. And I want to talk about this further, because this is a little bit more of how I knew things were going the direction of Ineos one way or another. As far back as February, they were already working on, what are we going to do when we take over? What are we going to do to help with this? What are we going to do to fix up the sporting side? What are the problems that we see? What is all of this? And putting the resources they already had in place. throughout this process, there have been many points in time where Dave Brailsford and other people have been talking to people at the club and gathering information and almost working as if they're ready to be making a transition to control of the sporting area. There's a lot of data that's been gathered, a lot of things that they already know and have about United in specifics. And that's where priorities come into play. The priorities of Ineos immediately are to fix the structure of the club and hire the right people. That's what I've been told. That's what I've seen from other people. That's what their focus is going to be on. Get the right people in place at the club to make sure that the structure is running right. If that's Merton Arnold, then they're going to have to make a huge case for it. But they certainly have their own ideas in mind and have already evaluated a lot of information. I would expect significant staff changes and appointments. It may not even be that everybody is gone, but maybe shifted and expanded to have a bit more of a robust thing where you really have a lot of department heads. Maybe John Murtaugh becomes again kind of like the head of, he was over before women's in the academy and these things, actually has done a really great job with a lot of that as well. There might be different roles and ways that things are delegated and separated that results in some people staying on, but they have a lot of ideas in mind for who they want to bring in and what they want to bring in. And Jean-Claude Blanc, I don't think he's going to have necessarily a role at the club, though they've thought about at times, should he be the CEO, even if it's like an acting or interim CEO. But he's the CEO of sport at Ineos, so it's less likely that he has a dual role from a practical standpoint, but he will be very much overseeing a lot of getting the right people in place. That's going to be a huge part of his job, and his purview over all of this. I did a poll on Twitter and I did a poll in other areas on different things, but on Twitter I asked what are the biggest, what is the first priorities? Recruitment, stadium, debt, structure, and departments. Structures and departments was by far first, followed by recruitment, which goes hand in hand, and then debt and stadium way at the bottom. And that really is going to be the route that Ineos take it as well, because it's just the one that makes the most sense. Fix the structures and departments. It'll help fix recruitment. There's already been articles detailing all of that. The debt, the original plan was shifted onto Ineos's books. That'll likely be still the plan. It just depends on when now, based on what the stages are of this takeover. And then the stadium is something where they have plans for it. It's something that's going to take a while, but it's obviously then and going to end up likely being last. And like they said, the first thing is you want the team to be performing well. You want everybody to be really cooking. You don't want to be, we're going through a new stadium and we're renovating this and we're redoing all these departments at the same time, because you can end up with a situation where it's just too much instability within the club and things fall apart. And so there is a reason why things are done in a sequence of actions. And so I've kind of already gotten into the plans on and such on all of this, but effectively, yeah, the plan is, first and foremost, they've already been evaluating an enormous amount of information on United. They already have ideas in mind of who they want to appoint. They're going to evaluate certain things and talk further with certain people, but I can tell you some of that is, some of the decisions have already been made in terms of what they're going to put in place and what they want within the sporting side of things. Some of it has already been decided, and it's simply a matter of getting their hands in. I think that I wouldn't have specifics on like a transfers or anything like that at the moment, but certainly one of the things of note is that it would be quite easy to invest a little bit in the club, and even with FFP things, because that FFP cap can be raised by investing. It's at the lower end because there's been no owner investment. So if they invest just a little, it could allow for certainly transfers and things like that. But a big part of it is going to want to be first even evaluating these situations. Take the Sancho situation, restructuring the departments, reappointing people, and seeing if these aren't situations that can be salvaged by properly instituting a top-down plan that may help in resolving things like that from happening, and also perhaps salvaging them. So we will see. But the plans are being made. The plans have been worked on. There's been stages where the team at Ineos have literally been practically operating as if they're already in there at certain points of times, not in terms of a specific like direction on what to do, but in terms of data gathering and assessments and talking to people. They've been involved. And so I think the good part about that is they can put things into work pretty quickly. It's not like it's going to take them a year to figure out what's going on at United. I think they already know almost everything for the most part. Okay, so wanted to clear up a lot of bad information, a lot of things like that on this, because I think that it's important to have the right perspective on how this deal happened and why, but also then the things to remain skeptical of be the right things. It's not about a commitment to the club. It's not about money. It's not about things like that. Ineos have more money. They offered more money than they're spending right now to United. And the only reason that's not being spent has nothing to do with commitment to the club, but purely down to legal reasons and a route that hopefully still results in the same end solution. Okay, so that's what I have. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I will see you in the next one.